Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out on this kind of dreary evening for our fabulous event. I'd like to start off by reminding everyone that to silence your cell phones, please, and then we'll get to the fun part. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Jennifer Keller, a member of the programming team, and I'm speaking this evening on behalf of Bill Harmer, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us this evening. This unique and emotionally transforming project was conceptualized by Bill's friend and Westport Library supporter Dan Levinson about 3 years ago. They met to talk about publishing a book Dan was thinking about, sparked in part due to the journey to death of his own father. He realized that others might have equally compelling tales to tell and wanted to honor others throughout this town that have likewise passed on from serious illnesses. Each of the people in this book had chosen an unconventional means to die with dignity, and their stories certainly are worth sharing. This book allows us to identify with each of the 10 people represented, whether we knew them personally or not. Their stories are different, but the same in the sense that each of the people memorialized in this book died, and they did it on their terms, with meaningful and difficult choices having to be made, each with the immeasurable love and unconditional support from their families and friends. These stories in this book are gut-wrenching at times, real and compassionately sobering accounts of what it is like to die with dignity and the courage it takes to do that. We don't talk about death in our culture, so the candid accounts contained within this anthology will undoubtedly move you in ways you otherwise might have thought impossible. So on behalf of all of us, we want to thank Dan for sharing his idea and pushing to bring in death the gift of life to life. And if you haven't picked up your copy, they're on the table right back there for the taking today. If you didn't know, it's also won several awards, including the National Indie Excellence Award, which is the little sticker on the front cover. Thank you also to the team of colleagues who identified each contributor and found writers to capture their stories. Thank you, Allison McBain, who is, Allison, where are you? Oh, there she is. Who, for editing the book, and Sue Pfister for your dedicated support. Miggs Burrows for the design of the book cover. And tonight we celebrate the lives of those we have loved and lost. So I would like to remind you to pick up the book on your way out. And without further ado, I'm going to invite Diane Lohman, Westport's first Poet Laureate.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief because it's only 17 syllables. I am so flattered to have been asked to be a part of this. I think everybody that made this happen, and I'm delighted that we finally have our long overdue book launch. And I'm honored to be right at the beginning. It's on a picture of a dragonfly, which for me have a lot of meaning. We cannot see them, transparent dragonfly wings, but we can all fly. Thank you.
Do you ever think about death?
Yes, once in a while. Do you?
Yeah, I think I do.
Sometimes when I do, I get sad, but I don't usually.
Death is such a taboo subject that people run from it as opposed to tackling it or dealing with it.
I think about living more than death.
We're the only species that are aware of their own mortality.
We don't talk about it. Most of us are afraid of it. And maybe it really should be the opposite. Maybe we should welcome it. Maybe we should embrace it. Maybe we should nurture it.
But it really is a gift to let a family member know what your wishes are.
The project started as just an idea to do something in honor of my dad and maybe to do a book. And by the virtue of the partners coming in, the library, hospice, senior center, the artists and the other people, it's become a true community project.
And that was Dan's idea, is to open up this topic. I mean, it's something nobody really wants to talk about.
I hope it opens the conversation and gets people more comfortable talking about something that's just a natural part of life.
You asked about why death is a taboo subject, and so here we are talking about a book with 10 people who are going to talk about their experiences. But I think it's an important part, a very important part of our lives. And for people who have gone through it, they'll find a lot to identify with. And for people who haven't yet gone through it, it might be enlightening. It might be something to learn to help prepare them for the way in which to go about it.
He knew as soon as he was sick that he had a bucket list to get through, and he achieved absolutely everything on that list. He continued to play tennis, he traveled, and lived his life with intention in that he knew how he was going to die as well. I think we need more of this type of conversation, and that's why I think this project was amazing. And he was really happy to be a part of it.
It really is a freedom for families to have that conversation, to know the wishes of their loved ones, and to be able to see those wishes to their conclusion.
Everybody should do what they want and what's right for them, and maybe think about it a little bit. She made me promise her that we would not take her out of the house, that she could be right there in her room where she was comfortable. She just wanted to peacefully pass in her own way. It took a lot of hands, and it's really sad to watch. But it's sad in the hospital, too. So I guess it made it better that she was doing it her way. We felt much better about it. She wasn't afraid of it because she didn't let things get to her, and she always looked at the bright side.
The wonderful families who are sharing their story with us during this project will really be a catalyst for those of us in the public who may have not given it too much thought about what our wishes might be at the end of life.
I do think my father had a really interesting end of life. And it became very interesting how my father chose to leave. Towards the end of his life, he wanted to share what he knew. What he was leaving behind became important, and his legacy. I think my father left his mark on everyone, and just like my father lives on in me, he lives on in a lot of people.
Estelle Margolis's story is actually wonderful for a number of reasons. She was way ahead of her time. She was an activist. She always fought for the rights of others.
My grandmother embodied what it meant to live and die with intentionality and grace. By laying out her wishes so clearly, she made it relatively easy for her family to fulfill them when the time came.
The purpose of the book is just to share the experiences of people that have chosen a different way to think about and enact their final times here.
He made the most of a terrible situation, I think, which I think is a gift that is rare. He had a very hopeful, sort of positive approach to life, and I think he liked getting that out there and sharing that. He got diagnosed when he was 11, and he didn't die for another 20 years. So it was I feel like his illness sort of changed his approach to life. He did as much as he could, I think, in the time he had to help other people. He probably helped more people that way than he might have, had he not been diagnosed.
I wound up taking care of her at home. I feel, my kids feel, very, very lucky that we had the time to go through it with Pam the way we did. It's not a negative. The end result was negative because we lost her, and that's the hard part. But the journey was really, really significant. I mean, it doesn't get any more significant than that, really, does it? There weren't any people who knew her who didn't love her. That's a pretty good legacy.
And I think it's such a gift when a family can have this conversation and share it with not only their families, but with the community at large.
It's devastating. It's hard to have your children die. You expect that you will die before they do. I remember he said, oh, you mean I'm dying? He actually said that. He looked at me and he called me Mumsy. What do you think, Mumsy? He said. And I told him that he would be loved because there was nothing else to say. You think you know every day when you get up what's going to happen that day, and you really don't. He really was beloved. There's no two ways about it.
I think the motivation for the book and the 10 chapters from different people who have been writing is an attempt to be more authentic in our own lives. That somebody who reads the book maybe will get one page into it and will put it down and the wheels will turn and it will affect their life. The people who initiated this project understood the need for authenticity.
Many of the stories in this collection are personal stories and hit home. And one of the stories in the book is about Nancy Kuhn-Clark, who was a longtime beloved employee and staff member here at the Westport Library.
Nancy was really a fixture of the Westport community as a librarian. I've heard so many wonderful, positive things about her, not just from her family, but from people she worked with. She just devoted her life to the library and her family.
Nancy was loved by the members of this community and by this staff.
Of course, it's going to be sad. It's always sad. We're going to shed tears. But as time goes on and you reflect upon the last chapter of your loved one's life, those tears will become joyous.
So this was his. It's right here. There's a couple in other places in the house. Just little memories. And he spent 10 weeks here, and he was low maintenance the whole time. And it's because he had treated the issue the way we talked about. Treated it with respect. He was honest about it. We knew everything we needed to know. He had no unfinished business. And we were able to just be together without a lot of fear and worry and drama and so forth. But it was beautiful, 10 weeks, beautiful, like, completion. It was a gift. It was completely a gift to me. A wise woman I know said, there's not a lot you can really give another person in this life, and he gave you your life, and then he gave you his death. And she said those are two lifetime gifts that a parent can give to a child. I think what my dad had seems to be special and beautiful, except that once we started talking about it, there were other people that had the same experience, and that's what the book is about.
These are personal stories about people who have essentially managed their own exits in the way that they manage their lives.
It's not a how-to book or anything. It's just real stories. People can get out of what they want.
Each one is moving in its own way, and each person in this anthology is amazing.
We're really excited to bring this project to the community at large.
It can be an opportunity to just begin that conversation.
This will be an important work if it makes people think differently about their own death. I didn't want to come tonight. You know, it's been a long couple of quiet years. And I'm like, no one cares. It's over. What's the big deal? And here I am, like, bawling away at the whole, how do you get a voice like his? Right? That dude was cool. My dad worked till his 90th birthday. And when he was, Jared, by the way, amazing video. Amazing. So he worked till his 90th. He was a psychiatrist. He said, as long as I can stay awake, I can keep working. And then he got diagnosed, and so we talked him into coming in, but then the next morning he was literally sitting on his suitcase at the front door, like an 8-year-old. I don't want to impose, it's time for me to go. But he gradually gave in, and so began like this amazing period that you heard described. And something about he just let go, and he became so funny and so happy in his last 3 months. And important to him, since he was very intentional, he was like, I am a founding member of Exit International. Exit International was how to be in charge of your own life, how to control your own death, how to not get caught up in the medical and the systems and the way we tend to run things. But he was still a psychiatrist and calm, so he just calmly listened to whatever someone said, and then he'd be like, I think I'd like to retain control of this process. And it was funny because he had something he'd gotten in Canada, which could have ended his life, and it was in a little safe, but taped to the top of the safe was the key. And a couple weeks in, he's like, Dan, where's that thing I brought in with me? You know what I mean? It was just, everything about it was like simple and direct and open and honest, and also then it became funny and brilliant and deep and beautiful. So don't worry, I'm not gonna retell. By the way, if you want to hear the story, Dan tells it better than actually the thing happened. So you're gonna read the book, and thank you for that. But the bottom line was the time together was magical. And as his body and his mind faded a little bit, he became wiser, happier, funnier, like really funnier. He was teaching Eileen to play bridge when he couldn't anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, he was sitting out front reading the paper, but I knew he couldn't read, but then it got sunny, so he put the paper on top of his head. And just every minute was this journey that we never could have because he was working, he was responsible, he was the father, like he was doing that other thing. And so there became something beautiful in that moment. So I would say his death was one of the most like real and alive things that ever happened to me, and I know it changed us both. And so this project and this book is just about sharing that beauty, sharing our experience, and empowering others, which he would have wanted. Like, I would like to help people to have more meaningful conversation about difficult things. That was his thing. And so this book, and then discovering that everyone else, many, many other people are having the same experience. So we're here tonight, finally, to celebrate this amazing community project. And it's funny, 2-3 years ago, the project of it felt more real. Get the library and the senior center, hospice and MIGS and Eileen, we're gonna do all this thing. And now it's all like faded, but the emotions, and it's not sadness even a little bit, it's just emotion, it's joy, it's beauty, there's no sadness in it. Dr. Seuss said, don't be sad it ended, be glad it happened. And so there's like, our culture is like, oh, and it's not that. It was amazing, it was beautiful, and when you start with that, then you can have a conversation, like, with a person. So, thank you to all the families that showed up, that trusted us, that shared their stories. Thank you to the writers that then jumped in. Thank you to Allison, you know, right, for making it happen. And then for me personally, it was more like, hey, Bill at the library, Sue, she'll always back me up. She knows I'm full on insane, but she keeps showing up for some reason. Thank you, Sue, right? And then Sharon, who not everyone knows, so Sharon spoke on the video a lot. So she ran for years hospice. And, you know, so the library, you come here if you want to have like an honest conversation, like about some truth, and you go to Sue at the senior center when things start getting a little weird. Hospice is like when it's getting real. You call those people and they are unbelievably so different from the whole, they're like, try that, Dan. I'm like, really? I can do that to them? Sure, try it, try that, try that. The natural, the empowering, the thing about hospice. And Migs for always just making everything better when you're around, for all that, and Eileen, of course, for keeping us out of jail. It's been 20 years, which, you know, so this town does have spectacular people in it, and like, where else can you just get on the phone and there you have it, and then you're winning awards for I don't know what. So if my dad was here, he would say, Jared, just what came out pretty clear on the video, right? Like, one, like, get clear about what you want. 2, make sure the people around you know that. And then, as my mother used to say, don't take any shit from anybody. Like, fine, you can go do, and just like, but you have to hold to it, because the culture and the way we think about things is gonna suck you into some other place. So if you wanna have the book experiences, you're gonna have to kind of prepare for it. The people around you are gonna have to really know. And then you kinda, I think, are gonna be having to fight for it. If you ask me what's important, as the other half of that dance we did, it's, I think, I wish I could look at whichever camera was my kids were on the other side of, but it's like, set your life up in a way that when something important happens, you can show up for it. You're not flying here, making there, obligated every place else, like showing up. Like I had no skills for this, but I was able to just be there. So showing up for important things to me is what it's all about. So he drew so many people to him. He's like, who's coming today, Dan? I feel like a king, you should be charging admission. And this from like a quiet, contemplative, right? It was really, in talking about all this with my kids, I got a little clear and I'm like, all right, guys, you know, what if I'm like, one day I'm gonna get a little older and things, my youngest is like, I'll shoot you. And the other one's like, no, I'll shoot you. And I'm like, yes. And I always tell them about like, you know, the Westerns where your buddy is at the stake, you have to shoot him, or where, you know, like we just don't talk about that. We don't do that anymore in this culture. And so I think the kind of like a little bit of the piece was when Dad walked in, I'm like, Pops, we didn't have to say it. Like I said, Pops, like, I got this. I know what you want. And I know my responsibility. So you can relax. So you can just relax. It's not going to get to any of those places where you don't want it to go. And that's also something we don't always talk about. And people, that's an honor, you know. He gave me the opportunity to learn and to grow and to have that honor. So thank you again for all of you who came together to make this project possible. I hope being a part of it has meant as much to you as it has to us, and maybe together we can help some other people to have some great experience as well. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think most everyone who was involved in the project knows me. My name is, excuse me, Allison McBain, and I was the editor for this project, and I was so honored to be the editor and to experience all these stories, these wonderful stories. I'm going to be brief, but I do want to do a shout out to all the many people who were involved in this project. First, the wonderful, very personal stories, Pritz Levinson, Frank Hall, Alan Wasserman, Pamela Parsons-Nodden, Nancy Kuhn-Clark, Ann C. Beers, Estelle Margolis, Jerry Gross, Charlie Karp, and Matthew Kleiner. These are the 10 stories that make up this wonderful book, and every single one is worth reading. I'd also like to mention the writers who captured these amazing stories. And many of them were either friends or family, and were really able to show a personal and beautiful insight into each of these stories. Dan Woog, Frank Hall and Lori Nuremberg, Craig D.B. Patton, Mary Lou Wiseman, Cheryl Kane, Jarrett Leota, Jonah Newman, Sarah Gross, Eleanor Duffy, and Robin Weinberg. There were also 2 wonderful local poets. We heard from one amazing one here, Diane Lohman, and there was also Marcia Temlock, who has a very beautiful poem at the end. And last but not least, the members of the committee who conceived and shaped this idea. We've already mentioned them several times, but I'm going to repeat the names because without them, this project would not be here today. So I'm just going to do first names. We're all on a first name basis. Dan, who you just heard from. Bill, who unfortunately could not be here today. Miggs, Sharon, Sue, Eileen, and myself. So while this project was hyper-local to our area, its reach has extended beyond the corners of this town, as evidenced by the many awards it has won. There were a few mentioned, but it took home first place in the Connecticut Press Awards. It also received a second place in the National Federation of Women Press Awards and an honorable mention. And it was also a finalist and won the top place in the nonfiction category for the annual National Indie Excellence Awards. So it really touched a lot of people along the way. So now I would like to introduce a few authors, 3 authors who were a part of this and wrote some very meaningful stories. So I'd like to ask Mary Lou Wiseman, Jared Leota, and Dan Woog to come to the stage.
I elected to go first, so thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see you here. This was a project that was a pleasure to work on. I interviewed James Naughton. There is so much I could tell you about my interview with James. That he lives in a rangy farmhouse in Weston, that he invited his 2 adult children, Kira and Greg, to take part in the interview, and that when we 4 sat around the small table and I turned on my recorder, I still didn't know what I wanted this interview to be about. And then I did. I'm going to tell you a love story. Pamela Parsons and James Naughton met and fell in love when they were both 17. They would be inseparable for the next 49 years until her death in 2013 at the age of 66 from pancreatic cancer. Jim went on to drama school and stardom as an actor, singer, director, and 2-time Tony winner. Their son, Greg, an actor, singer, director, and member of the folk rock group, The Sweet Remains, is married to singer and actress Kelly O'Hara. 3 years later, their daughter, Kira, was born. She married a civilian, but she too is an actor and director. The Naughtons were an odd couple. He, an outgoing celebrity, she, a shy social worker. So I'm going to read you a little something of what happened when the tape was running. It's been my dumb luck, said Greg, that I was born to this mother and this father. They provided us with almost a sickening amount of love. They were tremendous together, a tremendous team. This is rare in any realm, but in the theatrical and artistic world in which they lived, this was particularly rare. Dad's co-stars and colleagues would often take me aside at an opening night party or some other occasion, and they'd say, Greg, how do your parents do it? They would lament their many broken marriages and the children who resented them. They wanted insights into the secret of my parents' marriage. My mom was very gentle, very shy person, but probably by dint of the marriage she got herself into, the lifestyle of being around artists all the time, she became more of an extrovert. Still, I think motherhood was her proudest role. She was the quintessential mother. I'm afraid I'm going to cry, said Kara, but Greg had beaten her to it, followed by Jim. Of all the parts that Jim Naughton has played, none outshines his role as devoted husband and father. He put his career on hold for 4 years to care for Pam. When she could no longer care for herself, Jim took over. He cooked her food, he fed her, he learned to cook, he changed the sheets, and became an expert at infusing her chemo cocktail through her port. In what would be the final weeks before her death, Pam's devoted oncologist, Richard Frank, suggested that it might be time to hire a live-in skilled helper to manage Pam's care. Then what would I do, said Jim. Pam agreed. And here's what she said. I don't think either of us wants someone here in between the two of us. At the end of her 4-year ordeal, as she lay unconscious, surrounded by Jim, her family, and close friends, Jim told me that Pam opened her eyes, smiled at Jim, and said, "Weren't we lucky to have found each other when we were just babies?" I turned off the recorder, and then Jim spoke. "She gave me that gift," he said, "right at the very end." So thank you.
Thanks, Mary Lou. It's so good to see so many pre-dead people here. I was really fortunate when Dan asked me to originally write a story for 06880 about his dad. It was fascinating. It was something that I hadn't really thought about, but his story, his family's story, was special, and I looked at it as one of the most important stories that I've done because it opened my eyes and it opened my readers' eyes to something, as everyone has said so far, we don't talk about. And then when Dan asked me to write his father's chapter for the book that he was planning, I was even more honored because just as his dad's death was a gift to him, he was giving me this gift to help tell this really, really important story. Most of the stuff that I write is fairly short, 400 or 500 words, throw in a couple of bad parking jobs, and I've done my job for the day. But this was much more. I was able, Dan asked me to talk to a variety of different people, and I was able to weave their stories together. And Dan told his father's death story very, very well, but there were so many other people who were involved. Children, grandchildren, friends, people who just knew her tangentially, knew him tangentially. And with every interview that I did, a different piece of the puzzle, a different tile of the mosaic really showed itself. And it became my job to put all those pieces together. And I was really, as I said, I was honored to do it. Dan gave me the ability to pass along this really, really important story to everyone. And at the same time this was happening, my mother was going through her own final days. And my sisters and I, wanted to ship her off to Meadow Ridge or whatever. And she said, "No, I want to stay in the house." And that was the right decision for my mother. She was able to die in her own bed. And she too had a really good death. Speaking of hospice, I think she set the world's record for shortest time in hospice. We signed the papers. They were going to come for the bed, and she died before they even came with the bed. And she did that on her own terms. And thanks to Dan, thanks to Dan's dad, I was able to really relate to that in a way I might not have. So thanks to everyone. The book is fascinating. There are 10 very, very different stories about 10 very, very different deaths. And I hope when the sequel is written 50 years from now, I can be part of it as a subject.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm just really appreciative to have been part of this project. Very briefly, I was thrilled to do Anne's story because I actually had gotten to interview her a couple years earlier for a film project, and so that was kind of a neat connection. But I just want to briefly say, I mean, the whole concept of doing something like this, I think, is so valuable. And it's such a topic that we don't like to talk about, you know, and there's so much, you know, taboo around it, and so much, you know, worry about saying the wrong thing, and it's awkward and all this kind of stuff. So the opportunity to have a discussion and to put it out there just for discussion. Everyone's going to have a different story, you know. What Anne went through and her choices at home, it may not be for everybody. It may not be for everyone in relation to the family. But the idea to look at it, and it's part of life. It's so interesting. We're all headed that way. I mean, I'm sorry to let you know that, but we're all headed that way. But it doesn't have to be scary, and it doesn't have to be negative, and it doesn't have to be something we deny. And the stories in the book are so, you know, it's inspirational, but it's also, you know, and such a big thank you and gratitude to all the families for sharing, you know, because I think there's something so, you know, we kind of go through life, you know, what is it? What song is it from Alice? Going through life with blinders on, it's tough to see. Sorry. But it's like that experience, when you have that sort of tangible experience of something so big, you really wake up, it's an awakening. And I think there's such a great, vital thing to share that awakening with people, you know. So that's all I got. And now, to tell his family's story, here is James Naughton talking to Jay Shadler. We're going to see a video.
I want to talk to you definitely about the death and dying, right to die legislation, because I know you're a big advocate of that. But I want to begin and end with Pam, really, and your story and your family's story. She sounds like a little bit of magic, for sure.
Imagined? Did you say?
Magic. She sounds like Pam was magical.
Yeah, she was. Everybody who met her was blown away. And she was one of those people in a room whom everybody sought out to tell them their problems. We'd walk into a party and we'd come out and she had everybody's story. And I didn't have any idea how that happened, but she was one of those people that was trusted and confided in.
Yeah.
And I guess that's magic.
And she, by nature, was more introverted, a little bit shy, but in a theatrical world that you lived in, that had to be a little bit of a transition for her.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, she didn't have a performing bone in her body. If I suggested the idea that she get up and make a speech or something, you could see the colors start to rise in her neck. So we were truly opposites in that way. And both of our children, Greg and Kira, became actors and singers and performers. And she was the rock.
Yeah.
She held everybody together.
It's interesting that you use the phrase the rock, because so often as I read the story of this long journey you all were on between 2009, I think, and 2013, something like that. She was remarkably strong. Were there things that you learned about Pam during that long journey that you didn't know before it began?
Well, 9 years out, 9+ years ago was when she died. And I keep thinking about how resilient she was in the face of the ultimate kind of adversity. You know, I mean, she was the one who said to me toward the end, well, Jimmy, we've always known that this was a fatal disease.
Yeah.
It takes something to be that resilient, and that's just, she was gifted with a kind of strength, inner strength that really wore awfully well on her. And
How about you, Jim?
Well, you know, you don't know. I think it may have been said in the story that's in the book
that her mom and dad and aunt and grandmother all died at 98. So there was no way that I was ever supposed to survive her. And all of our estate planning was done with that in mind.
Right.
My brother-in-law and I used to kid that she and her twin sister, Patty, would be the two doddering little old ladies who were off doing yard sales and garage sales together and antique shops for the rest of their lives, long after we were gone.
Right.
But it's a cliche, but life can throw you some curveballs, and I had no idea that I had it in me to take care of her for that long.
There's a part of the book where you talk about making the very conscious decision that you were not going to accept a caregiver into the house. You wanted to do this yourself.
Yeah, well, that just seemed like the natural thing for us to do. It didn't take a lot of conversation. It was just, you okay with this? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do. And it was it was the right thing for us to do.
Yeah. That's one of the things I'm curious about too, is that all of these terminal illness situations are both universal in some respects, but also very individualistic. I'm curious if you have any thoughts, advice, lessons for other families who might be approaching this.
I've had some dear friends whom I lost before Pam went. I mean, in every different scenario. A dear friend, a close buddy of mine, died from ALS in the late 80s. And I went through that with that family, and that's an extraordinary experience. When I say I went through it, I mean, I was really a part of the whole time, and it took several years. I don't know that there's anything that I could say that I've learned that I could pass on. Every family has to go through it their own way. Obviously, I think it's easier on all of the survivors if the person who's going and who leaves has the kind of strength that Pam had.
Yeah.
There wasn't a sentimental feel sorry for herself bone in her body. It was, and for me, that made my role kind of clear. My job was to facilitate the keeping going. I think I mentioned that we went to San Antonio, Texas every week for 8 months.
Right.
So we participate in a trial. And we flew to, there was only one way flight per day from JFK. So on Tuesday, we'd fly down there, and on Wednesday, she'd get treated, and we'd go out to dinner Wednesday night and go to the Riverwalk for the 18th time,
right,
to the Alamo for the umpteenth time, and then come home.
Alamo is appropriate.
Yeah, and go home early because it was the only one-way flight, nonstop is what I mean, on Thursday. And it was funny, but in a strange way, it wasn't difficult. Largely because for me, I got to actually be helpful, facilitated. We had somebody pick us up at home and take us to the airport, and we knew where we were going, and the wheels were greased.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it was kind of rewarding, and we both felt some sort of crazy freedom from the whole deal.
Yeah.
Down there like on a date for 36 at 48 hours. It was weird, but we made the most of it, and my job was to find a way to keep going forward.
Yeah.
Until we couldn't anymore.
The decision to do an experimental treatment was that a difficult decision to make, or did you say this is the next step? We've got to do everything we possibly can.
It was very easy for Pam and me to make that decision because there wasn't an alternative. Dr. Rich Frank, who was our oncologist, was wonderful. And he finally said to us, we don't have anything else to throw at this. We've exhausted the list of chemotherapies that we have. But there is this new trial going on that I heard about. Here's the phone number, call the doctor. And
You did.
that's how we made that decision.
Dr. Frank, from what I read, he sounds like he was an extraordinary treasure for you guys.
Yeah, he still is. The kids and I did a concert down at the Westport Playhouse about 4 or 5 years ago. And it was a fundraiser for Dr. Frank's new research to try to find an early diagnosis for pancreatic cancer. And we raised a lot of money that night. They had all the friends of Norwalk Hospital and all the friends of the Whittingham Cancer Center at Norwalk Hospital showed up. And we gave Dr. Frank and that trial a check for $1.3 million.
Oh my goodness.
For our one little performance that night. We're gonna do another one next year. But the good news is that his research is showing great promise. He told me a week or two ago that he thinks that they're maybe 6 months to a year away from finding a blood marker. And if we could find a marker for early diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, we could save a lot of people's lives and an awful lot of suffering and all their loved ones suffering.
That's
But yeah, he's quite a guy.
I'm curious what you think of the title of this book that is filled with these terminal life stories, is in death, the gift of life. What does the title, if any, those words mean to you?
I have no idea. I don't know. I saw the title. I'm sure it means something to somebody, whoever named it, but I don't really get it.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because I gathered that the stories of people, families, losing loved ones, we're all gonna die.
Yeah.
And maybe we can learn a little something about what life is. Maybe that's what it means, by examining the stories of how we leave this veil of tears. I can hear my father. This veil of tears, yeah.
I was thinking about, as I was reading the story, those classic sort of stages of grief. I can never remember them all, but it's something about anger and denial, and bargaining, depression. The last one is acceptance. If you're fortunate enough to have acceptance at the end.
Yeah.
Sounded from the story that I read of your life with Pam, that she went almost straight to acceptance on this. Was that an overstatement or not?
Well, I didn't see a lot of those other emotions in her. She was resilient, and I guess what that means is that she was able to survive as long as she did, which was 4 years, which is a pretty long time for that disease, and make the most of them. She was, I think it mentions in the story that I called her a baby whisperer. She was really, really something special. Our grandson, Owen, who's now 13, used to come up the walk, and I'd open the door and I go, "Hi, Owen." And he'd go, "Hi, Poppy, where's Baba?" That's all he cared about. Baba, he named her, and that's what it was. And so for her, I think it was about trying to make the most of every moment that she had left.
Yeah.
And she was, she made a tremendous impact on all of us and everyone who knew her, and certainly on her family.
For 3.5 years of this journey, she seemed to have done really well, and in many respects, very few people would have even recognized, right, that she was ill. But things turned in 2013. How did the family sort of shift or cope with that?
There were just more processes every day.
Yeah.
she wound up being put on oxygen. Then she wound up with a pain pump. And once a week, a lady would come in and check the pain pump and make sure everything was fine. And we had deliveries of morphine that had to be refrigerated. And there were just a lot of different, and through it all, I never heard her complain.
Remarkable.
He just kept going and trying to make the most of it to try to last a little bit longer so she could spend a little more time with those grandkids.
Right.
It sounds simplistic, but
no, it doesn't.
It's not that at all. It's some kind of crazy inner strength that just allowed her to keep going. And so my job was clear. Make sure that all this stuff works. Just the logistics of putting someone who's on all those attachments into the car to take her somewhere, to the doctor, to the hospital. We had to find another place to get the car closer to the house so we didn't have to go down the stairs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The logistics.
I'm curious if I mentioned that we want to chat a little bit about the right to die legislation. At any point, did you ever think about moving to a different state that had right to die legislation?
I don't think we thought about it.
Yeah.
She played it out right to the end. And then she went.
Right.
What medical aid in dying is about is trying to help people who are in those last stages of suffering and just keep lingering. I've testified now, I think three or four times in Hartford before the Public Health Committee when they have these hearings.
Yeah.
Going up there, hanging around all day, then being called, going in and telling the people on that around that desk who serve on the legislators why I'm there and what I went through and what it meant to me when Pam said to me one day, "Jimmy, I don't want to wake up anymore."
Was this the concession speech that she made?
When someone gets to that point, what I felt was I would do anything to give her what she wanted.
Right.
And that's what I told the legislators. A couple of years ago, we lost, they didn't vote it out of committee, so it never made it to the floor. The last 2 years, that committee has voted it out. They voted it out last year, 22-9 in a bipartisan vote. That was a big deal. And then the enemies of the bill stuck us over into the Judiciary Committee and they killed it by one vote. It's like, that's the committee where things go to die.
So it went from one committee to another committee, essentially.
Yeah, and we're hopeful that maybe this year we can get it passed because in the last couple of years, the Connecticut Medical Society, that's the doctors in Connecticut, have gone from against this legislation to neutral. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
The Nurses Association, Connecticut nurses, have gone to favorable. And we know from last year's Gallup polls that 75% of Connecticut residents want this legislation. So what I would say to our listeners is talk to your friends and call your legislators and write them letters and say, where do you stand on this? We've got elections coming up in a couple of weeks. And I know where some of these legislators stand on it. And you know who I'm going to be voting for. I'm going to be voting for the people who are for the legislation, because I think it's really important. One of the women that I have met who was a teacher in West Hartford has been saying for the last 2 or 3 years, along with me, to the legislators, please get this thing done, because she knew she was dying. She had a stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
And she did die this past winter. And her friends and her family have told me that the last 3 weeks of her life were everything they didn't want it to have to be.
Right.
I went up and saw Kamala Harris the other day, 2 days ago, New Britain, talking about Roe v. Wade. And what she said is actually pertinent to this argument. She ended it by saying, there are people, we all have friends who say that they can't support Roe because of their religion. And she said, but what we can say to them is, you don't have to go against your religion. You don't have to do anything that would be contra to what your religious beliefs are. But you could recognize that the government shouldn't be telling people what to do either.
Exactly.
Well, that's the same argument that we have here with medical aid in dying.
You're a powerful advocate, both from your personal story and from what you've learned, I'm sure. And I never understood the opposition to it, and I think personally I would certainly consider moving to a right to die state if terminal illness were in the cards.
At this point, I would too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I said I wanted to begin and end with Pam. There's a story at the very end that I'd like you to just briefly relate, and that is, in her final hours, really, you had thought that she had slipped into unconsciousness for the last time, but then suddenly she awakens. Tell us that story.
We were all gathered around the bed all day, pretty much for a couple of days, and it was our children, the two grandchildren, two of the three grandchildren, and her sisters and brother. And we were with her, hanging out in the bedroom. And that night, I didn't think we were going to be hearing from her anymore. I thought that she was down pretty deep, and that would be it. My daughter-in-law, Kelly, Greg's wife, was pregnant with their second child, about 4 or 5 months pregnant. We didn't know, they didn't know whether it was going to be a boy or a girl. And at 8:30 that night, Pam arose and got up on one elbow in the bed. We were all in the room, and some of us were sitting on the bed. And she looked down at the corner of her bed and started to talk to somebody that only she saw. And what she said basically was, "Oh, look at you. Aren't you a pretty little girl? You look just like your mommy. What's your name?" "Charlotte." "What a wonderful name." And the rest of us all stood there, jaws agape, wondering what we were watching.
Right.
And then after a little while, she stopped smiling and she lay back down and closed her eyes. 36 hours later, Kelly went and got an ultrasound, and they were going to have a girl. And so 4 or 5 months later, we had a little girl named Charlotte.
That is spectacular.
And now she just turned 9 years old.
Well, maybe that's the additional meaning to in death, the gift of life.
Maybe that's it.
Maybe that's it.
Anyway, it certainly was a gift to the rest of us. And none of us has any understanding of what we were watching then or now, but weird stuff happens.
Let the mysteries flourish. Thank you so much. I really, really deeply appreciate it. Like I say, you're a tremendous advocate for this, and we're all so grateful for your time tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. I've appreciated talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Quick note, if any of you after the program would like to speak to anybody you've seen up here, feel free to go over to the book table or find them in the forum here and ask questions or talk to them. Sue?
Well, that's certainly hard to follow, but we'll do our best. So, I did not have the opportunity to meet Charlie Karp, but I certainly have listened to his music. Not many students drop out of Staples, but Charlie did at the age of 16 to pursue his guitar playing with Buddy Miles. He then began to hang out with Jimi Hendrix and Keith Richards, and even wrote songs for Joan Jett. Charlie was loved and admired. Charlie's music lifted many hearts, and tonight, Miggs will introduce his band, the Name Droppers, who will play a few songs in Charlie's honor. Together, let us enjoy the lyrics, the music, and most importantly, the gift of life and the lessons it has to offer us.
You're quite the name dropper yourself, Sue. Buddy Miles, Jimi Hendrix, Joan Jett. To put this in context, in the early 60s, it was the golden age of rock and roll in Westport, as far as I'm concerned. My brother Trace, who's here, was in multiple bands, and none of those kids, they were all 13, 14, including Charlie. I had my license, so I was the designated roadie who took a lot of these bands and kids back and forth. So I got to know, not well, but I was introduced to Charlie and his music. And of course, he grabbed the golden ring and bands such as White Chocolate and Dirty Angels. And finally, the name droppers who are gonna play. And they are, just a note about what they're up to, their album Name Droppers 2, I think is out or just dropped recently within the last few days. And they are doing a benefit concert November 12th called Ukraine We Stand, which is a benefit for Ukraine, at the Bijou Theater in Bridgeport. So the current lineup is Rafe Klein, who's been in the Name Droppers for 10 years, and he is guitar and vocals. And then there's Carol Sylvan, who is vocals, and there's Ron Rifkin, who is piano and vocals. I think I got all that right. So without any further ado, could the Name Droppers come up and honor Charlie? Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rafe Klein. This is Carol Sylvan. This is Ron Rifkin. And as you heard, we played with Charlie. Charlie was one of my best friends. I was with him every day when he died. And so it's an honor to be here to play some of his music. And the first song we're going to start with is a song that he wrote when he was 16 years old. He was going to high school here at Staples. And as Miggs just pointed out, he was with Buddy Miles. He was on tour with Buddy Miles, and he had this song. It's called I Still Love You Anyway, which is a love song. Somehow, he convinced Buddy to put it on his record. He recorded it, and it was a #2 song on an album called Them Changes, which was one of the most successful albums that Buddy Miles ever put out. So Carol's going to sing it. Again, it's a song called I Still Love You Anyway, written by Charlie Carr.
What do you want from me? I have nothing left to give. What would you like to see? A broken heart, please tell me that I could be sad and cry, and my brother would wonder why. You don't realize I understand what it meant when you pushed away my hand, my hand. Where do you stand with me? Lord knows, Lord knows. Where would you like to be in my life? Please spare me, 'cause I could be sad and cry,
And my brother would wonder why. You don't realize I understand what it meant when you pushed away my hand. My hand. I still love you anyway, yeah. But it's no use, no use without you, baby. I still love you anyway, yeah. But it's no use, no use, no use. What do you want from me? I told you 1,000 times I've nothing left to give. What would you like to see? Nothing, so please leave me and let me live. 'Cause I could be sad and cry, and my brother would wonder why. You don't realize I understand what it meant when you took away my hand. My hand. I still love you anyway, yeah. But it's no use, no use without you, baby. I still love you anyway, yeah. But it's no use, no use, no, 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 no. I still love you anyway, yeah. But it's no use, no, 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 no. I still love you anyway, yeah. But it's no use, no use without you, baby. Thank you, thank you. Matter of fact, this song was the last song that I recorded with Charlie actually being there. So this is very special to me.
It was actually one of the last recordings that Charlie was ever at. He went into the hospital 2 days later. All right, so the next song is a song we're going to do. It's called I Haven't Heard From You. Fast forward 20 years later, in the 90s, Charlie wrote this song. He wrote it all by himself, but he never released it. And when I heard it, I fell in love with it, and the band loved it. And we loved it so much that we included it on Charlie's final album, which was called Back to You. And it's even on the new Name Droppers 2 record. That's how much we liked the song. We decided to do it again. It's a song called I Haven't Heard From You. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
little bit much. Oh, I figured you'd leave first. You put the blame on me. Now I'm wondering what to do. 'Cause I haven't heard from you. Not one word from you. You left me hanging on a feather. And I haven't heard a thing. I'm kind of in the dark. Say that absence can make a heart grow fonder. This is getting to be a little bit much, a little bit much. Oh, I haven't heard from you. I haven't heard from you. Not one word from you. Not one word from you. Oh, I haven't heard from you. I haven't heard from you. Not one word from you. Not one word from you. Well, thank you. All right, so I'd like to fast forward another 30 years, I guess. The next song that we're going to do is a song called Sure Thing, which is a song that I co-wrote with Charlie. Ronnie's going to sing it. And it was one of the final songs that Charlie wrote, one of the last songs that we wrote together. And if you listen to the lyrics, it's about life. It's about living life and enjoying life and growing old. I think you'll dig the lyrics. See the passers-by. Mama told me not to talk to strangers, so I had to say hi. Look through any window, sun is shining bright. Everybody looks so pretty, wondering what they're doing tonight. You are a sure thing. I'll keep you here with me. When it comes to loving you, babe, best is yet to be. Look out any doorway, world is shining bright. Everybody's in a hurry, trying to get somewhere tonight. Look out any window, let the world pass you by. Let your heart be forever joyful. Don't let them see you cry. You are a sure thing. I'll keep you here with me. When it comes to loving you, babe, best is yet to be. You are a sure thing. I'll
Thank you so much. That was a song called Sure Thing. What's next? Lighthouse. Now we're going to do a song called Lighthouse. It's a song that I wrote with Charlie. And we did it on the Charlie Carp last album. And we liked it so much, everybody talked about the song, sort of a spiritual song. And Carol recorded it on the first album that she did with us after Charlie died, on her album called Love, which was actually number 13 on the Relics chart, debuted. And this is a song called Lighthouse. We hope you dig it.
On a valley of spring, and I wait for him always, for the love that he brings. Shine down on me, shine down on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine down on me. Shine down on me, shine down on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine down on me. Let your soul and spirit wash over me. Let your soul and spirit shine down on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine down on me. Let it shine, shine down on me. 7 miles to the ocean, on the outskirts of town, there's a place that I run to, where he'll be around, where the moon is shining on a valley of spring, and I'll always remember the morning breeze. I said, shine down on me, shine down on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine down on me, shine down on me, shine down on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine down on me. And the wind is howling, and the tide's rolling in. After the water breaks, that's where it begins. But the lighthouse is strong, and the sea takes its tolls. Salvation lives, oh yeah, on the sandy shores. I said, shine down on me, shine down on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine down on me. I said, shine down on me, shine, shine, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse keep on shining down on me. Let the light keep on shining now. Shine down on me, shine down on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Thank you.
Miss Carol Sylvan.
Thanks. This last song I usually do as an encore in the show because of the lyrics. The lyrics are so positive, and it's something that I wish for everyone. Death is something that we all have to go through, whether it's, we don't know our own, but, you know, with other folks, we have to be there. I've gone through a lot, especially through the pandemic. I lost so many friends, and my best friend right at the beginning of the pandemic. So, but there always is something positive that we can always hold on to keep hold on. And that's why I love to sing this song. It's called Days Like This. What if your tomorrows were yesterdays, and your heartaches, yeah, just fade away. Those broken dreams won't be missed when the sun shines on days like this. Your happiness, yes, that comes to you would be gone, gone when love's untrue. Those broken dreams won't be missed the sun shines on days like this. When the sun shines on days like God bless everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Rafe and Ron, thank you.
Thank you very much.